Don't move. Don't breathe. There are 8 of them, and I've already mapped every position." Nobody on the team had ever heard Natalie Brooks speak like that. Not in 7 months. Not once. 2 operators were bleeding on the ground. The radio was dead. Enemy shooters owned every angle of the valley, and the entire unit was pinned with nowhere to go and no way out. Then the quiet woman who carried maps and reviewed satellite data reached for a rifle case nobody had ever seen her open. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. And in the next 12 minutes, 8 hidden snipers learned the most expensive lesson of their lives. If you're watching this story for the first time, welcome. Subscribe to the channel. Follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. The briefing room smelled like burnt coffee and dry erase markers, the same as every other forward operating briefing room Sergeant Natalie Brooks had walked into over the past 8 years. She stood near the back wall, arms folded loosely, and watched Captain Ethan Walker lay out the mission on a laminated map that had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases had turned white. It was a reconnaissance assignment. Standard parameters. A mountain corridor in Eastern Europe that intelligence had flagged 3 weeks earlier as a probable resupply route for a fragmenting but still dangerous insurgent network. The mission was to confirm movement document activity and get out clean. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. Walker ran through the operational breakdown with the efficiency of someone who had done this 40 or 50 times before. He pointed. He numbered. He assigned roles with the brisk authority of a man who trusted his team and expected his team to trust him back. When he reached the final slot on the assignment sheet, he glanced briefly at Natalie. "Brooks, communication support tactical analysis. You stay with the rear element and keep the relay chain clean." Natalie nodded. That was it. That was her entire acknowledgement in a room full of men who had been operating together for years. Staff Sergeant Dominic Reyes, who was standing 2 feet to her left, didn't bother lowering his voice when he leaned toward Marcus Webb, the team's primary marksman. "Command still got her on babysitting duty," Reyes said. Webb made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "She probably requested it." Neither of them looked at her when they said it. Natalie didn't react. She kept her eyes on the map, because she had made a decision a long time ago, long before this team, long before this assignment, long before the particular brand of casual dismissal that came with being underestimated in rooms full of people who wore their confidence like body armor. She had decided that proving herself with words was a waste of time she didn't have. Skills didn't announce themselves. Skills waited. And Natalie Brooks had learned a very long time ago how to wait. She had requested this assignment. That part was true. Reyes had guessed right, even if he'd meant it as a small cruelty. She had gone to her commanding officer 11 months earlier and asked specifically for placement with an active team, not a high-profile counter-sniper unit, not a classified precision cell. Not the kind of assignment that came with commendations and formal recognition and a carefully worded citation that never actually described what you'd done. She had asked for a regular team. The request surprised people who knew her record. Her former commanding officer, a colonel named Patricia Hargrove, who was one of the very few people alive who had read every line of Natalie's classified service file, had looked at her across a desk stacked with operational reports and asked the question directly. "You want to walk away from precision work?" "I want to be part of a team," Natalie had said. "You are part of a team, one of the best small units in the program." "That's not the same thing." She had paused, choosing her words carefully, because Hargrove deserved precision, even in personal conversations. "When I was with the precision group, I worked with people who communicated in coordinates and exit vectors. We were professionals. But we were never really together. We finished assignments and separated. There was no before and after, just the mission." Hargrove had studied her for a long moment. "You're tired of working alone." "I'm tired of only existing inside the work," Natalie had said. "I want to belong somewhere." It was the most honest thing she had said to anyone in uniform in years, and it had cost her something to say it, not because she was ashamed of it, but because honesty in that world was a form of exposure, and exposure required trusting that the other person could hold what you'd given them. Hargrove had held it. She approved the transfer 2 days later. The assignment came with a note that wasn't in the official paperwork. She's more capable than her file suggests. Don't waste her. Nobody on Walker's team ever saw that note. The team had been operating for 7 months before the Eastern Europe mission came through. In those 7 months, Natalie had learned every person on the team the way she learned everything, carefully, quietly, without announcing that she was paying attention. Ethan Walker, 37 team captain, had been in special operations for 15 years. He was a good commander, methodical, honest with his people. He made decisions under pressure the way a surgeon made cuts quickly, and with the kind of confidence that came from having rehearsed the crisis 1,000 times in his head before it arrived. He was also, like most good commanders, entirely focused on what people demonstrated in front of him. He didn't look for what people were holding back. Dominic Reyes was 33, fast-talking, funny, in the specific way that combat operators were often funny, dark and quick and sharp at the edges. He had been with Walker for 4 years. He trusted his instincts about people, and his instincts about Natalie had crystallized on day 3. She was support staff with a calm personality and nothing to prove, which meant she was exactly what she appeared to be. He had filed her away and stopped wondering. Marcus Webb was the team's designated marksman. 29 years old, rangy and quiet, in a different way than Natalie, where her quietness was a chosen posture. His was a practiced stillness, the kind that sharpshooters developed because movement was the enemy of accuracy. He was good. He knew he was good. He had enough professional pride that he would never have admitted even to himself that he hadn't really looked at the woman assigned as their comms analyst, because looking at her too carefully might have complicated what he'd already decided about her. There were 7 operators total. Natalie knew all of them. Their rhythms, their habits, the specific way each of them handled stress and boredom and danger. They knew her name and her job title. For 7 months, that gap had suited her fine. The helicopter dropped them at the base of the mountain corridor at 0430. The air was cold in the way that high-elevation October cold is cold, not just temperature, but weight. It pressed against the skin and found the gaps in gear and reminded you that comfort was something that happened somewhere else. Natalie moved with the rear element exactly as assigned, keeping the communications relay stable, monitoring the frequency channels, flagging the occasional burst of chatter that came through on adjacent bands. She did her job the way she did everything, precisely, without excess. For the first 3 hours, the mission unfolded exactly as planned. They moved through the corridor. Webb and Reyes swept forward positions. Walker managed the operational tempo. The satellite imagery had suggested possible activity in a ravine approximately 4 kilometers into the corridor, and as they closed the distance, the terrain began to change, the ground rising sharply on both sides, the path narrowing between rock faces that turned the sky into a thin strip above them. Natalie felt the change before she could name it. It wasn't movement, it wasn't sound. It was something in the structure of the space, an absence where there should have been presence. Birds. Wind patterns. The way a specific rock formation caught shadow at an angle that didn't match the light source. She filed it without speaking, because she had learned over a decade of this work that the most dangerous observation was the one you blurted out before you were certain. Uncertainty announced itself as weakness. Certainty, even delivered quietly, commanded rooms. She wasn't certain yet. She kept moving. The first shot came at 0847. It arrived the way the first shot in an ambush always arrived, completely, with a terrible completeness that erased the version of reality that had existed 1 second earlier. There was no warning, no escalation, no opportunity to prepare. One moment the team was moving, the next Corporal Danny Fitch was down. The round had caught him in the shoulder. A serious wound, but not fatal. The way a first shot in a precision ambush often wasn't because a dead soldier stopped moving, and a wounded soldier created a problem for everyone else. Walker's voice cut through the immediate shock with the controlled authority of someone who had trained for exactly this and still felt the adrenaline trying to override the training. Contact cover now. Fitch, talk to me. I'm up. Shoulder, I'm up. Webb direction. Can't find it. Webb's voice was clipped and precise, but underneath the precision was something tighter. Elevated, northeast quadrant. Can't pin the position. They went to cover in the way combat units go to cover fast low, reading the terrain in fractions of seconds and making imperfect decisions at maximum speed, because imperfect decisions made quickly were the difference between living and dying. But the terrain here was wrong for them. The valley had been chosen carefully. The rock faces channeled sound in ways that made direction ambiguous. The elevation gave the shooters complete visual control. Every position Natalie could identify offered temporary protection, but no angle for return fire. You could get behind a rock, but getting behind a rock meant you were also cut off from any sightline that would let you locate the shooters. The second shot came 90 seconds later. Corporal James Okafor took it in the thigh. Down and cursing but breathing. 2 operators down. The team pinned. No air support. The mission profile had been designed for minimal footprint and maximum deniability, which meant they were exactly as alone as they felt. Walker's face when Natalie looked at him from her position behind a boulder was controlled and purposeful, but working at its edges. He was calculating. Running scenarios. Finding nothing clean. Reyes, he said. Count of potential positions. At least 4. Could be more. They're rotating windows every time we think we've found one. They've already moved. Webb. I see the movement, but I can't get a shot. Angle's wrong. They know exactly what cover this terrain gives us. Which meant this wasn't an opportunistic ambush. This had been set. The positions had been selected specifically to exploit the limitations of the valley. Someone had studied this ground before they arrived. Natalie processed that fact and connected it to 3 others she had been holding quietly for the past 40 minutes. The absence of birds at the eastern ridge beginning at 0810. The reflection she had noticed off a rock face at a point where no natural reflection should have existed at 0827. The branch movement on the western slope at 0839 in the wrong direction for the prevailing wind. 4 pieces. 1 picture. She counted the shooter positions, not from what she could see, but from what she understood about how precision shooters constructed overlapping fields of fire in elevated terrain. She knew the doctrine. She had written versions of it herself. She understood what the enemy commander had been thinking when he placed his people on this mountain, because she had thought the same thoughts from the other side. 8 positions, minimum. Maximum, probably 8. Captain Walker. Her voice was completely level. Not raised, not strained, just calibrated to cut through the noise at the specific pitch that people actually heard when fear was making hearing difficult. Walker turned. His eyes were sharp and focused, and exactly as surprised as she had expected. Brooks. 8 positions. I've already mapped them. A beat. A very short beat, but she felt it. You can't possibly. Northeastern ridge, primary position, natural rock formation at the 3rd cluster. He's been there since before we entered the corridor. She delivered it quickly and without heat. Secondary on the eastern face, approximately 30 meters lower, using shadow coverage from the overhang. 2 shooters on the western slope, working a rotation. They switch every 3 to 4 minutes, which is why your angle keeps changing. There are 4 more I've been tracking since the second shot. I can tell you exactly where each one is and in what order they'll move. Nobody said anything. Webb was staring at her. Reyes had gone very still. Walker's eyes moved over her face with the particular intensity of a man who needed to make a decision in the next 30 seconds and was determining whether the information in front of him was reliable. Who placed you in analysis? He asked. My request, she said. That's a different conversation. Right now, I need 60 seconds and I need you to trust me." "Trust you to do what?" Natalie looked at him steadily. "To take them apart." "Tai." Walker took 4 seconds. Natalie counted them not impatiently, but precisely because 4 seconds was a reasonable amount of time for a good commander to absorb a paradigm shift in an active combat situation, and she respected that he was doing the work honestly rather than just reacting. "Your weapon," he said finally. "Case in the rear pack, 30 seconds. She moved before he finished nodding. The rifle case had a 3-digit combination. Her hands found the numbers without looking. 714, the only arbitrary number she had ever allowed herself, a date she didn't explain to anyone. The case opened. The rifle came out in pieces that her hands assembled with the automatic fluency of 10,000 repetitions. Reyes watched her the entire time. She could feel his eyes, and she could feel the specific quality of his watching, not the casual dismissal of the past 7 months, but something new and alert, and slightly uncomfortable, the look of a man who was revising something he had been certain about. She didn't acknowledge it. "When I tell you," she said to Walker, her voice still that same precise calibration, "I need the team to create noise. East face. Simulated attack pattern. I need them looking the wrong direction for exactly 11 seconds. 11. Give me 10. I might have to rush the last 2. Give me 12. The first position will have time to reset. 11 is the window." Walker looked at her for 1 more second. "Team," he said into the radio. "On my mark. East face. Full noise, 2-second burst, then pull back to cover. Mark in 30. Natalie settled into position. This was the part nobody ever saw until they saw it, and once they saw it, they could never unsee it. The way she became still, not frozen, not tense. Still in the way that a body becomes still when every unnecessary thing has been stripped away, and what remains is pure function. Breath, heartbeat calculation. The absolute marriage of trained perception and physical precision that took years to build and looked from the outside like nothing at all. Like someone who wasn't afraid. Like someone who had done this 1,000 times. Because she had. "Mark," Walker said. The team opened up on the eastern face-controlled bursts, aggressive enough to demand attention, positioned to force the shooters to verify the threat and shift their coverage windows by fractions. Fractions were enough. Natalie found the first position through the scope the way she found everything. Not by looking for it, but by already knowing where it was, and simply confirming. The primary shooter on the northeastern ridge had been there since 0810. He had chosen a natural rock formation as his cover, because natural cover was superior to constructed cover in almost every circumstance, because it didn't require maintenance and didn't telegraph human presence. He had made one mistake. 1. When he had settled into that formation, hours before they arrived, he had positioned himself for the approach trajectory that a standard reconnaissance unit would use coming from the south. He hadn't fully accounted for a rear element position that was slightly elevated relative to his expectation, a 2-degree difference in sight line that created a single narrow window of exposure at the top of the formation when he shifted weight to his left side. He shifted. She fired. The sound of her shot was still in the air when she was already moving to the second position. The team heard it differently than they had heard Webb's shots, which were familiar sounds in a familiar context. This was something else, a single clean report from a direction they hadn't expected, followed by a silence on the mountain that felt different from the silence before. "Brooks," Walker's voice. "Second," she said. Not to reassure him, just to keep him oriented. The eastern face shooters were rotating now. She had given them a timeline of 3 to 4 minutes between rotations, and she had given that estimate not as an approximation, but as a calculated projection based on the pattern of position changes since the ambush began. The second shooter was in transition, exposed for approximately 8 seconds as he moved from the shadow of the overhang to his new position. She waited, not nervously, not impatiently, the way a person waits when they understand exactly what they're waiting for. 5 seconds. 6. There. Webb had pulled up beside her. She was aware of it, the way she was aware of everything in the field, peripherally, precisely without letting it change her focus. He wasn't interfering. He was watching. Watching the way a skilled marksman watches another skilled marksman. Learning. Western slope. She said, not taking her eye from the scope. Two-person rotation. They think the rotation makes them invisible. It does from below. From here, the transition point is in the same place every time. Webb didn't say anything for a moment. You've been tracking them since we went to cover. Since before that. Another pause. How long before? 40 minutes. She felt him process that. Felt the specific quality of the silence that followed, not hostile, not skeptical, but adjusting. A professional recalibrating. You should have said something, he said finally. I wasn't certain yet. You seem pretty certain now. Now I am. She fired the third shot. On the western slope, the rotation stopped. Reyes's voice on the radio. Walker, what is happening right now? It wasn't a question. It was a man watching a thing he didn't have language for, yet asking the question sideways, because the direct question, who is she, what is she? Why didn't I know this was too large to fit into a combat situation? Walker's response was quiet and precise. She's working. Keep the east face suppressed. I'm trying to understand. Reyes. Walker's voice had an edge. Later. But Natalie heard the edge and knew what it meant. It wasn't irritation at Reyes. It was Walker managing his own version of the same recalibration, processing what he was watching and holding it aside because the situation required his operational attention, not his personal reaction. She respected that. She kept working. Positions 4 and 5 were a coordinated pair. Two shooters who had been placed to create a crossfire coverage of the valley's central approach. They communicated with each other through signal patterns that she had identified over the course of the ambush, a specific firing rhythm that coordinated their windows. When one fired, the other shifted. The pattern was sophisticated but not unpredictable, because all patterns existed within constraints, and constraints once identified became maps. She had identified the constraint 15 minutes ago. The fourth shot. The fifth shot. 11 minutes and 40 seconds into the 60 seconds she had asked for. 3 positions remaining. Walker's voice quiet and controlled, but with something underneath it she had not heard from him before. Brooks, you have 6 down. 7, she said. The 5th position had 2 shooters, western slope secondary. Silence. 7, he repeated. 1 remaining. Southeastern quadrant behind the granite outcropping, approximately 400 meters. He's been still for the last 3 minutes, which means he knows something has changed, and he's deciding whether to run or hold. What's he going to do? Hold, she said. He's been holding that position since the ambush began. He's the anchor. He won't break pattern. She adjusted. The southeastern position was the hardest. The shooter had chosen well. The granite outcropping provided genuine all-angle coverage, and from any approach position below the ridgeline, there was no clean shot. The geometry was in fact designed to be impenetrable, from below. From her current position, slightly elevated and at an angle the enemy commander had not calculated for, there was a window. Small, precise. The kind of window you only found if you already understood the math. She found it. She took it. The mountain went silent. Not the silence of before, which had been the silence of a battle waiting to happen. This was the silence of something finished. 12 minutes. 8 positions. Natalie lowered the rifle, and in the stillness that followed, she was aware of every person on the team looking at her. Not the look she had received for 7 months. Something entirely different. Something that had weight to it. Walker's voice came through the air between them, and it was the voice of a man who had thought he knew his team and had just discovered he was wrong in a way that was going to take time to understand. Who are you? Natalie checked the chamber. Habit. She checked it every time, regardless of what was happening around her. The same person I was this morning, she said. Same person I was yesterday. Same person I've been for 7 months. That's not... He stopped himself, started again. I didn't know. No? She agreed. She said it without accusation because it wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. He hadn't known because he hadn't looked. She hadn't told him because she hadn't needed to. Until now. Reyes was on his feet. His voice, when it came, had lost the casual edge she had been listening to for 7 months. What remained was something rawer. The whole time, he said. 7 months. You never... He stopped. You just walked around carrying maps. I was carrying maps, she said. That was my job. That wasn't your only job. No, she said. It wasn't. She began breaking the rifle down. Her hands moved through the steps automatically the way they always did, and in the rhythm of that automatic movement was something that none of her teammates could fully read yet, but that some of them, years later, would describe as the most specific thing they remembered about that morning. She didn't look relieved. She didn't look satisfied. She didn't look like someone who had just proven a point. She looked like someone who had done what needed doing and was now doing the next thing. She looked exactly the same. That was the part that stayed with Dominic Reyes for years afterward. He had expected something from her, some shift in the mask, some moment where the version of her he had underestimated cracked open and showed him the version she'd been hiding. But there was no crack, because there was no mask. The woman he had dismissed as background presence was exactly who she had always been. He had just never bothered to look. Walker called for medical support first because Fitch and Okafor needed attention before anything else, and a good commander knew the order of priorities even when his world had just been reorganized. While they waited for the medevac, Reyes sat down beside Natalie. She was running the communications relay again. Back to her assigned role. Systematic, present. He was quiet for a long moment. I said things, he said finally. Yes. You heard them. I hear most things. He processed that. Why didn't you? Because it wasn't the right time, she said. And because saying something would have just been words. You could have shown us in training. She looked at him then directly for the first time in 7 months with the full attention she usually kept directed elsewhere. Would you have believed it? She asked. Or would you have found a reason to explain it away? He opened his mouth, closed it, because the honest answer was the uncomfortable one, and they both knew it. I don't know, he said finally. That honesty cost him something, and she noticed that it did. That's why I waited, she said. When it mattered, there wouldn't be room for explanations. There would just be the result. She turned back to the radio. Reyes sat with what she had said, and he sat with it for a long time, because it wasn't the kind of thing you could dismiss or set aside. It was the kind of thing that changed the shape of how you saw a situation. Not just this situation, but all the situations that had led here, every moment he had looked past her, every offhand comment, every assumption he had made about what was and wasn't present in the person standing next to him. The medevac came at 10:24. By then, the mountain had been fully quiet for over an hour. The silence was different from the silence of the ambush, and different again from the silence of the 30 seconds before Natalie had spoken. It was the silence of a team that was rearranging itself around a new understanding, doing it carefully and without announcement, the way people do when they have encountered something that requires them to revise not just a fact, but a way of seeing. Walker moved past her twice before the helicopter arrived. Both times he looked at her and did not speak, and both times she recognized the quality of his looking a commander, building a new picture, organizing what he knew, preparing for the conversation that would happen when the operational urgency released them into something like clarity. She didn't rush him. She had spent 7 months not being rushed. A little longer wasn't going to change anything. What had happened on this mountain had happened regardless of whether anyone understood it yet. 8 positions, 12 minutes, and the knowledge settling quietly into every person on that team like the cold morning air, the person standing among them, carrying her equipment, monitoring her frequencies, doing exactly her job, without complaint or performance or announcement, had been extraordinary the entire time. They just hadn't known to look. The medevac lifted off at 10:31, carrying Fitch and Okafor toward a forward surgical unit 60 kilometers west, and in the rotor wash of its departure, every person left standing on that mountain had nothing left to focus on except the quiet and each other. Walker waited until the sound died completely. Then he said, "Brooks, walk with me." It wasn't a question, and they both knew it. Natalie set down the communications relay, checked that the frequency was stable, and followed him away from the rest of the team to a position where the words between them would stay between them. Walker stopped, turned, and looked at her the way she had watched him look at operational problems, with the focused, systematic attention of a man who was not going to let himself be satisfied with a surface answer. "I need your real file," he said. "You have my file." "I have the version they gave me when you were assigned. It lists your MOS, your training qualifications, your communication certifications." He paused. "It doesn't list what I just watched you do." Natalie was quiet for a moment. "No," she said. "It wouldn't." "Why not?" She looked at him directly. "Because I asked them not to include it." Walker stared at her. "You asked your commanding officer to remove your qualifications from your service record. Not remove, restrict. There's a difference. Walk me through that difference, because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like you've been running a deliberate concealment operation inside my team for 7 months, and I need to understand why before I decide how I feel about it." The directness of that landed the way she'd expected it to. Walker was a man who ran honest conversations, even when the honesty was uncomfortable, which was one of the reasons she had chosen this team specifically. She had read his evaluations. She had known what kind of commander she was walking into before she ever set foot in that briefing room. "It wasn't concealment," she said. "It was context management." "That's a very careful choice of words." "I choose my words carefully. I've noticed." He crossed his arms. "Explain." She took a breath. Not because she needed composure, she didn't, but because the explanation deserved to be given in the right order, and getting the order right mattered. "I spent 6 years in a classified precision unit," she said. "Counter-sniper. Small team. The work it was real work. Important work. I believed in it. But the way the unit functioned, the way assignments were structured, I was never part of something. I was a tool that got deployed and then returned to storage. After every mission, I went back to a room and waited for the next coordinates." She paused. "I did that for 6 years, and I was good at it, and I was completely alone." Walker said nothing. "When I requested reassignment, I asked for the record restriction because I knew what would happen if every team I joined had full access to my precision history. I would walk into every room already defined. The new team would look at my file before they looked at me. They'd have expectations, preconceptions, and I would spend the rest of my career being the counter-sniper specialist, which is exactly what I'd been for 6 years, and exactly what had kept me from ever actually belonging anywhere." The silence between them had texture now. "I wanted to start as a person," she said, "not a capability." Walker let out a slow breath. It wasn't anger. It was the sound of a man absorbing something that required absorption. "You wanted to belong to a team," he said. "Yes. So you hid the most significant operational qualification on your record." "I let people see what was in front of them without loading it with context they hadn't earned yet." "And when were you planning to earn it?" he asked. "The context. When were you planning to let us see it, before or after someone got killed?" That one landed differently. She felt it. And Walker saw that she felt it, which was why he'd said it not to wound but to be accurate. "If it had gone the other way today," he said, and his voice dropped slightly. "If the positions had been different, if the window had been wrong, you might have let 2 wounded operators get killed while you waited for the right moment to stop carrying maps." "No," she said. "No. I would have moved earlier if the math had required it. The decision was always conditional on what the situation needed. Today the situation needed 60 seconds at the right moment. If it had needed them sooner, I would have moved sooner. You sound very confident about that. I am. And if your judgment about the timing had been wrong, she looked at him steadily. Then I would have been wrong, and I would have lived with it. But Captain, I don't misjudge timing. That's not arrogance. It's the one thing I was trained to get right, and I got it right today. Walker studied her face for a long moment. He was looking for the crack, the same crack Reyes had looked for and not found. The place where the performance ended. He didn't find it either, because it wasn't there. All right, he said finally. I'm going to need the full debrief when we get back. Everything, the actual file. I'll authorize the access. You're going to need to talk to the team. She nodded. And Brooks? He held her gaze. What happened today, the 8 positions, the 12 minutes, that doesn't stay on this mountain. You know that. I know, she said. Are you ready for what comes with it? She was quiet for just a moment. I've been ready for a long time, she said. I just wasn't sure the people around me were. She talked to the team that evening at the forward operating base in the common room that smelled like instant soup and boot polish, with the overhead light flickering slightly at one end, because someone had reported the bulb 3 weeks ago and nobody had gotten around to replacing it. They were all there, all 5 remaining operators. Walker sat on the edge of a table with his arms crossed. Reyes was on a folding chair turned backward, his forearms resting on the back of it. Webb stood near the wall. The other 2, Torres and Park, sat side by side on a bench, quiet and attentive in the specific way of people who had watched something extraordinary happen and were still processing it. Natalie stood in the middle of the room, and she did not start with an apology, because it wasn't an apology that was needed. 6 years, she said. Classified precision unit. Counter-sniper operations across multiple theaters. My primary function was to locate and neutralize enemy precision shooters, the ones targeting Allied commanders, communication specialists, extraction teams. The ones that regular units couldn't find, because regular units weren't trained to think the way a sniper thinks. Silence. I was good at it. I'm not going to minimize that, because minimizing it would be dishonest, and you deserve honesty. I was among the best at what I did. And I chose to walk away from it because being the best at something in isolation is not the same as being part of something. Reyes shifted on his chair. His jaw was tight. You let me call you a desk soldier, he said. You were standing right there. Yes. Why? Because correcting you would have just been words, and words don't change how people actually see you. Only time and evidence can do that. He stopped. That's a really cold way to approach being on a team. It's the only way I knew how, she said. And something in her voice changed slightly on that, not breaking but shifting the way a door shifts when the wind changes. I'm not good at this part. The talking about it part. The explaining who I am part. In the field, I know exactly what to do. In rooms like this, I'm doing my best. That landed differently than anything else she had said. Torres, who had been quiet since the mountain, looked up. You were scared, Torres said. Just not of the shooting. Natalie looked at him. I was scared of exactly what's happening right now, she said. Of this room, of telling you things and not being able to predict how you'd receive them. Nobody spoke for a moment. Webb, from his position near the wall, said quietly, You predicted every position on that mountain. Yes. But you couldn't predict us. No, she said. People are harder than patterns. Yamt. Reyes stayed after the others filed out. He waited until it was just him and Natalie in the flickering common room, and then he was quiet for a long time, which was unusual for Reyes, who was rarely quiet and almost never visibly uncomfortable. I want to ask you something, he said. And I want you to be honest, even if the honest answer makes me look bad. All right. The comments. What I said. The desk soldier thing, all of it. Did it bother you? Natalie considered the question the way she considered everything without rushing toward an answer that was easier than the true one. Some of it did, she said. He winced. Not because I needed you to believe I was capable, she said. I knew I was capable. That wasn't what was hard. She paused. What was hard was caring about people who had already decided who you were before they'd given themselves a chance to find out. Reyes was quiet. I liked you, she said simply. All of you, from early on. You're good operators and you're good people. And good people who dismiss you without meaning to, that's actually harder than people who dismiss you because they're unkind. Because at least with unkind people, you can keep your distance. With people like you, I couldn't quite manage it. Reyes put his head down for a moment. When he looked up, his eyes had a quality she hadn't seen from him before. I'm sorry, he said. I know. Is that enough? She thought about that honestly. It's a start, she said. The rest is just time and paying attention. I can do both of those things, he said. I know that too, she said. And for the first time in 7 months, she said it with the specific weight of someone who actually meant it. Not a polite response, not a management of distance, but a genuine statement about a person she had been watching long enough to have formed a real opinion about. Reyes recognized the difference. She saw him recognize it. He nodded once and left the room. The full debrief happened 2 days later at the Regional Command Center. Natalie had been in formal operational debriefs before dozens of them spread across 6 years of classified work, and they were always variations on the same architecture. A conference room, a recording device, officers with prepared questions, and the particular atmosphere of institutional attention that came when something had happened that the institution needed to categorize and file. What was different this time was the audience. Colonel Patricia Hargrove was in the room. Natalie hadn't expected that. She kept her face neutral when she registered Hargrove's presence at the far end of the table, but something in her chest did a specific thing that she noted and set aside. Hargrove gave her the smallest nod. The lead debriefer was a major named Hollis Compact, precise, the kind of man whose questions always had architecture behind them. He began with the chronological account of the mission, which Natalie delivered with the accuracy and economy of someone who had been trained to report rather than narrate. The questions, when they moved to her specifically, started carefully and then got direct. Sergeant Brooks, your service record, the restricted portions indicate a 6-year tenure with Precision Operations Group 7. That's correct. POG 7 was dissolved approximately 18 months ago. It was. The dissolution was classified. What you can confirm is that you were among the group's most decorated operators. I had a strong record, she said, which was the most accurate way to say it. Hollis looked down at a document in front of him. According to what we've been able to access, you completed 31 counter-sniper operations over your 6-year tenure. 29 were resolved without Allied casualties. The remaining 2 involved wounded operators who survived. He looked up. Is that accurate? The numbers are accurate. In how many of those operations were you operating as the primary shooter? All of them, she said. POG 7 was a single operator deployment model. Support personnel handled logistics and extraction. The operational work was solo. The room was quiet in a specific way. Walker, who was sitting 2 seats from her, had gone very still. She had told him about the 6 years. She had not told him it was 31 operations. She had not told him it was solo. She felt his stillness without looking at him. 31 solo counter-sniper operations, Hollis said. Yes. And you requested reassignment to a team unit? Yes. Hollis set down the document. The gesture was small, but it meant something, a man putting aside the paper because the paper was no longer the most important thing in the room. Why? He asked. It was the same question Hargrove had asked 18 months ago in a different office. Natalie gave the same answer because it was the true answer, and the true answer didn't change based on the audience. Because I wanted to belong somewhere, she said. Because doing important work alone for long enough starts to feel like not doing anything at all. Because I needed to be part of something bigger than a single assignment. Hollis studied her. And are you, he asked, part of something? Natalie thought about the common room, the flickering bulb, Reyes staying behind, Walker's 4 seconds of honest reckoning before he gave her the 60 seconds she needed. I think I'm getting there, she said. Nipoy. After the formal debrief, Hargrove caught up with her in the corridor outside. Walk with me, Hargrove said. They walked the length of the building before Hargrove spoke again. Her voice, when it came, had none of the formal structure of the debrief room. It was the voice of someone who had known Natalie long enough to skip the architecture. You're going to have a different problem now, Hargrove said. I know. The incident report from the mountain is already moving. Walker filed it through official channels because he had to, and when something like that moves through official channels, it doesn't stay contained. She paused. People are going to want you back in a precision role. I know that too. And I'm staying with the team, Natalie said. Hargrove glanced at her sideways. It won't be your choice entirely, I know. Natalie was quiet for a moment. But I'm going to make the case, and I think Walker will back me. Based on 2 days of post-incident interaction. Based on 7 months of watching him, Natalie said. I know who he is. I know what he values. He'll back me. Hargrove was quiet for several steps. The 8 positions, she said. The 12 minutes. Yes. Poggi. 7's clean record across 31 operations never produced anything that moved through channels the way this one is moving. Pog 7's operations were classified, Natalie said. Nobody was watching. Here there were 6 witnesses. 6 witnesses who couldn't predict what you were going to do. No, she said. That's the part that's going to follow you, Hargrove said. Not the capability can be filed and categorized. It's the unpredictability of it. The fact that you were there for 7 months and nobody saw it coming. She paused. People are unsettled by that. Natalie considered it. I think most people are unsettled by it, she said. I think a smaller number of people might be reassured by it. Reassured by the idea that there are people around them who are carrying more than anyone realizes. Hargrove looked at her. That's either a very healthy way to look at it, or a very effective rationalization, she said. Maybe both, Natalie said. Hargrove almost smiled. Reyes found her after the debrief. He had been in the waiting area, technically available for his own follow-up interview, but practically waiting for her, which she recognized immediately, because Reyes in a waiting area was not a man who waited. He was a man who moved and talked and occupied space, but he had been sitting still. 31 operations, he said when she came out. She had expected this. Yes. Solo. Yes. Over 6 years. Yes, Reyes. He stood up. He was a big man physically, and the hallway was not wide, and for a moment the proximity was just a fact she noted without concern. I don't know what to do with that, he said. I'm being honest. I genuinely don't know what to do with that information. You don't need to do anything with it, she said. You spent 6 years. I know what I spent 6 years doing. Alone, he said. Completely alone. 31 times. Something shifted in the register of the conversation. Not the tactical recalibration of the common room. Not the professional reckoning of the debrief. Something different. Something more personal. Yes, she said. Was it? He stopped, started again. Was it okay? I mean, were you? Don't ask me if I was okay, she said quietly. That's the wrong question. What's the right question? She thought about it. Ask me if it was worth it, she said. He looked at her. Was it? The work was worth it, she said carefully. Every one of those missions needed doing. The people who came home because of those missions, they were worth every minute of what it cost. She paused. What it cost me personally is a separate question, and the answer to that one is more complicated. Reyes was quiet. Natalie, he said. It was the first time he had used her given name. 7 months of Brooks of Hayview, and now in this narrow hallway outside a debrief room, just her name. She noticed it. She didn't comment on it. I'm glad you're on the team, he said. And I'm sorry it took me this long to know what that meant. You didn't know what to look for, she said. That's not an excuse. No, she agreed. But it's a reason. Reasons and excuses aren't the same thing. He nodded. Can I ask you something else? Go ahead. When you first got assigned to us, when you walked into that briefing room, what did you think? She considered the question carefully because it deserved care. I thought you all seemed like the kind of people who were worth the risk, she said. What risk? Of caring whether you saw me or not. The honesty of it stopped him completely. She had not meant it as a wound. She had meant it as a fact. But facts stated directly by someone who didn't soften their edges could cut the same way wounds did, and Reyes stood with it for a moment before he found what to say. We see you now, he said. She looked at him. Yes, she said. You do. 3 weeks after the mountain, a request arrived through official channels. It came from the Directorate of Special Operations, which was 3 levels above Walker's command authority, which meant it wasn't a request in any meaningful sense. It was a preamble to an order dressed in request language because the person who sent it had enough institutional courtesy to maintain the form. The substance was clear. There was a new program, a small elite unit being assembled specifically for high-precision counterinsurgency work. Multi-theater capability. The highest classification, significant operational scope. They wanted Natalie Brooks. Walker brought it to her directly, which she appreciated. He didn't route it through HR or leave a printed copy on her bunk or ask someone else to deliver it. He came to find her, which he did at 700 in the equipment room where she was running a maintenance check on the communications relay, and he handed her the printed summary and stood quietly while she read it. She read it twice, then she set it down. What's your read? He asked. It's a precision unit, she said. High-capability small-team classified operations. She paused. It's essentially POG-7 rebuilt with better resources. Which is what you left. Which is what I left, she confirmed. Walker was quiet for a moment. It's a significant opportunity. It is. It's also exactly the kind of assignment that would use what you're capable of at full scale. Not... He stopped. Not the way you use it, she said. He didn't deny it. I have 7 operators and a reconnaissance primary mission profile. They're proposing a dedicated counter-sniper program with multi-theater authorization. The comparison isn't flattering to what I can offer you. She looked at him. Captain Walker, she said. Why did you come find me yourself? He paused. Because it's your decision, and you should have the information directly. That's not the only reason. He held her gaze. No, he said. It's not. She waited. I don't want to lose you, he said. From the team. I think... He stopped. Started again more carefully the way he made decisions methodically, and without pretending the difficulty wasn't there. I think what happened on that mountain changed what this team is capable of. Not because you did something extraordinary once, but because you've been part of how we operate for 7 months. You see things we miss. You've been seeing them the whole time. He paused. I underutilized you. I know that. But I'd like the chance to not do that anymore. The speech had cost him something. She could tell. Walker was a man who commanded rather than asked, and this had been an asking careful and honest and slightly exposed, which was its own form of courage. She picked up the summary again, read the key line a 3rd time. Then she set it back down. I'll need to draft a response, she said. Yes. I'll need you to support it. I will. And I'll need some things to change, she said. On the team, in terms of how I'm deployed, I shouldn't be carrying maps while the tactical picture is being read incorrectly. Agreed. I mean that structurally. Not as a complaint about the past, as a condition going forward. Understood, he said. I'll restructure your role designation. She looked at him. Then I'm staying, she said. Walker was quiet for a moment. Something moved across his face. Not relief exactly, but something adjacent to it. The look of a man who had prepared for both outcomes and found that he minded one of them significantly more than the other, and was now adjusting to the fact that the outcome he preferred had come to pass. "Thank you," he said. She shook her head slightly. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just make sure the next 7 months look different from the first 7. "They will," he said. She believed him. Not because he'd said it, because she'd been watching him for 7 months, and she knew the difference between a man who said things and a man who meant them. Walker meant it, and that the simple, grounded fact of that was worth more to her than every decorated commendation in her restricted file. She picked up the communications relay and went back to work. The equipment room was quiet around her. She could hear the rest of the base beginning its morning rhythms, footsteps in the corridor, the distant sound of the mess hall voices moving through the air at the specific pitch of people beginning a day they hadn't quite shaken sleep from yet. She was part of those sounds, not peripheral, not background, part of them. It was a small thing, maybe. A person doing her maintenance check while the base woke up around her. Not dramatic, not decorated, but she had spent 6 years doing extraordinary work in a silence so complete it sometimes felt like the silence would swallow her entirely. And this ordinary Tuesday morning, this flickering relay unit, these voices in the corridor belonging to people who now knew her name and what it meant, was everything she had transferred for. She checked the final frequency. It was clean. She logged it and moved on to the next item on her list. And in the disciplined, systematic movement of that ordinary work, Natalie Brooks was the most complete version of herself she had been in years. The restructured role designation came through on a Thursday. Walker had pushed it through channels faster than Natalie had expected, 4 days from their conversation in the equipment room to an official amended assignment order that changed her operational classification from communications and intelligence support to tactical precision specialist primary. It was a bureaucratic document, dry and formal, and formatted exactly like every other military assignment order. But when she read it, she held it for a moment longer than the document technically warranted, because what it said underneath the official language was simple. "We see you now, and we're putting it in writing." Reyes spotted her reading it in the common room and said nothing, which from Reyes was its own form of respect. Webb saw it too from across the room and gave her a single nod that carried the weight of a much longer conversation neither of them needed to have out loud. She filed the order and went back to work. But the world outside her team had not filed it and moved on. The incident report from the mountain had traveled further and faster than Walker had initially estimated, and 3 weeks after the debrief, the shape of what that meant was becoming clear. It wasn't just the directorate request that had been the first wave. The second wave arrived in the form of people. Specifically, people who found reasons to be at her operating base who hadn't been there before. The first was a general named Carson, who arrived for what was logged as a routine regional review and spent 40 minutes of that review asking questions that had nothing to do with regional logistics. He sat across from her in a conference room with his hands folded on the table and his expression set to the particular configuration of authority that was designed to feel neutral but wasn't, and he said, "Walk me through your decision-making process on the mountain." So she walked him through it. She was precise and economical, and she answered every question without elaboration beyond what the question required, which was how she had been trained to brief and how she chose to operate in rooms where the power dynamics were unambiguous. Carson listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You identified 8 positions before the first shot was fired," he said. "Before the ambush began, I had identified 4 probable positions. After the first shot, I confirmed all 8. But you didn't report your observations to Captain Walker before the ambush." The question had an edge that was almost too subtle to catch. Almost. "At the time of my initial observations, they were probabilistic assessments, not confirmed positions," she said. "I was 40 minutes from certainty. I reported when I was certain." "The ambush happened in that 40 minutes. "Yes," she said. "Had you reported earlier?" "Had I reported earlier, I would have reported unconfirmed observations that could have altered the team's movement patterns in ways that might have produced different exposure to the threat." She kept her voice level. "Premature reporting of uncertain intelligence in active operations has produced more casualties than delayed reporting of confirmed intelligence. That's documented across multiple theaters. I made the call I was trained to make. Carson studied her. You sound very confident in that call, he said. I am, she said. 2 operators were wounded. None were killed. The threat was neutralized in 12 minutes. If I had reported 40 minutes earlier with incomplete assessment, the outcome might have been faster. It also might have been significantly worse. She paused. I'm confident in the call because the result was what I aimed for. I aimed for everyone going home. Everyone went home. The general was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The directorate request." I declined it, she said. I know. I want to understand why. She looked at him directly. Because I've already left 1 precision unit, she said. I know what that life looks like, and I know what it costs. I chose something different, and I'm choosing it again. The directorate program has resources that your current team cannot. General Carson, she said, and something in her voice shifted. Still controlled, still professional, but with a clarity underneath it that wasn't negotiable. With respect, the answer is no. I'm not asking for resources. I'm not asking for scale. I'm asking to stay with the unit I chose and do the work I can do there. She paused. If that's not acceptable to the directorate, I need to know that directly, so I can understand what my options are. The general looked at her for a long time. Then he said, Your options are considerable. That's the point. Then I'll exercise them by staying where I am, she said. Carson almost smiled, not warmly, but with something that looked like recognition, the particular expression of a senior officer encountering someone who was not going to be moved by rank alone. He closed the folder in front of him. Captain Walker's team is not the most efficient deployment of your capability, he said. Efficiency isn't the only metric that matters, she said. In this branch of service, it carries significant weight. Yes, sir, she said. And I'd argue that a soldier who has found the context in which she operates at her highest level is more valuable deployed in that context than extracted from it and placed in a technically superior program where she's replicating an experience she's already had and already left. She paused. That's not a feelings argument. That's an operational performance argument. I'll stack my record anywhere. Carson stood up. I'll note your position, he said. Thank you, she said. And when he left the room, she sat in the quiet for exactly 30 seconds before she stood up, because 30 seconds was what she allowed herself, and then she went back to her team. Walker was waiting outside the conference room. He had not been told the meeting was happening. It had been arranged through command channels that bypassed the team level. But he was standing in the corridor with his arms at his sides and the specific expression of someone who had found out about something they hadn't been informed of and was deciding how to handle the finding out. Carson, he said. Yes? How long? 40 minutes. What did he want? To understand why I declined the directorate request, she said, and to present the case for reconsidering. Walker's jaw shifted slightly. And I reiterated my position. He pushed. He's a general. That's what generals do when they want something. She looked at him. You didn't know about the meeting. No. His voice was flat on the word, in a way that told her the flatness was doing work, holding something back that he was choosing not to put in the corridor. Who scheduled it? Directorate liaison. They have the authority to access personnel directly without going through the team commander when they're conducting assessment interviews. She paused. It's legal. It's also a way of applying pressure without appearing to apply pressure. Walker looked at her. Are you under pressure? He asked. She considered the honest answer. Some, she said. Not the kind that's going to move me. Something in his face adjusted. I backed the restructuring, he said. I'll back whatever else needs backing. I know you will, she said. That's why I told Carson I was staying. He was quiet for a moment. You could have a significantly larger platform, he said. And she heard the specific difficulty in it, the particular honesty of a man stating the case against his own interest because he thought she deserved to hear it without the argument being shaped by what he wanted. I know, she said. You'd have resources, a program built specifically around your capability. Walker, I'm trying to be. I know what you're trying to be, she said, and I appreciate it, but I've already thought this through. I'm not staying because I don't know what I'm giving up. I'm staying because I know exactly what I'm giving up, and I know what I'm keeping, and what I'm keeping is worth more to me. She paused. Is that a sufficient answer? He was quiet for one more moment. Yes, he said. Good. Then can we talk about the next assignment? Because I've been reviewing the surveillance data from the Northern Corridor, and there are 3 elements that don't align with the pattern assessment, and I'd like to walk you through them. Walker blinked. Right now. When would you prefer? He looked at her for a moment with an expression she was beginning to recognize, the specific look of a man who kept encountering her capacity to shift from personal to operational in a single breath, and was still weeks and slightly off balance by it. Briefing room, he said. 30 minutes. I'll have the data ready in 20, she said, and walked down the corridor, and behind her, she heard Walker let out a slow breath that was not quite a laugh, and not quite anything else she had a name for. The Northern Corridor briefing changed the mission profile. Natalie had been right about the 3 misaligned elements. She was almost always right about data, which the team was learning to treat not as a boast, but as an operational fact, the same way they treated Webb's range accuracy as fact, or Reyes's instinct for personnel reads as fact. Everyone had a thing. This was hers, and bringing it into the open, naming it, and building it into how they planned was changing the quality of what the team could do. Walker restructured the approach entirely based on her analysis. Reyes, who had initially been the person most resistant to the asymmetry of Natalie's capability, resistant in the specific way of someone who prided himself on knowing his team, and had found that he hadn't, was now paradoxically the most aggressively in favor of using it. He brought her into planning conversations he would have previously conducted with Webb alone. He asked her direct questions during mission prep, and listened to the answers without needing to reframe them through his own interpretation first. It was a significant shift. It happened fast, the way real shifts did not gradually, but in stages, each stage locked in before the next one started. Torres and Park adapted with the quiet efficiency of people who were primarily focused on doing their jobs well, and had updated their operational picture to include a new and significant data point. Torres had started asking her questions during breaks. Not tactical questions, but observation questions. The kind that came from someone who was genuinely curious about how another person's mind worked. She answered them honestly, which she discovered she was more capable of doing than she'd thought, because Torres asked questions the way a person listened to music completely without multitasking. Webb was the most interesting adjustment. He was the team's primary marksman, and had been before Natalie's role restructuring the person whose skill set most closely overlapped with hers. That kind of overlap in a team could produce friction, 2 people with similar capabilities and different histories, and the natural tension of proximity. It didn't produce friction. What it produced instead was something she hadn't expected. He started bringing her into his practice sessions, not asking for correction. His technique didn't need her correction. He was genuinely excellent, but asking for her read on position analysis. How she identified patterns, how she built the picture from indirect information. The cognitive side of it, the part that happened before the trigger was pulled. She realized about 2 weeks in that he was doing what she had done with her previous trainers at POG 7, learning the structure of a higher-level skill from someone who had it. The recognition of that moved something in her that she didn't fully have words for. "You're studying me," she said one afternoon. "I'm learning from you," he said, which was a precise distinction, and he made it without embarrassment. "That's different." "How is it different?" "Studying is passive, learning is active." He was looking at his own scope, not at her. "I want to understand how you built the picture on that mountain, not the technique, the read. How you knew where they were before they showed you." "That took years," she said. "I know. I'm not expecting to shortcut it. I just want to understand the architecture." She looked at him for a moment. "Okay," she said. Okay. I'll show you how I think about it, starting now if you want. He set down the scope and gave her his full attention, and Natalie Brooks, who had spent 6 years doing extraordinary work in solitude, began to teach. The next mission came through at the beginning of the following month. A compromised extraction route in the southern sector. A friendly asset who needed to be moved and couldn't use the standard channels because the standard channels had been penetrated. Intel suggested the penetration was recent, which made it more dangerous because a recently burned route meant the people who burned it were still in position and expecting traffic. Walker briefed the mission with the full team, and he incorporated Natalie's terrain analysis into the briefing in a way that was now natural, not as an addition, not as an extra layer, but as a foundational element of how the operational picture was built. Reyes watched her during the briefing. Not the way he used to watch her passively, peripherally, with the lazy half-attention of a man who had filed a person away, but with real attention, the kind that tracked information and stored it. After the briefing, he fell into step beside her. "Northern approach," he said. "You think it's the right call?" "Walker's right about the primary route," she said. "But there's a secondary consideration he didn't have the data for, which is the penetration. If it's as recent as Intel suggests, the people who burn the channel aren't just watching the asset, they're watching the approaches. They'll have a visual on any point of contact within 300 meters of the extraction coordinates." Reyes absorbed this. So the approach isn't the problem. The approach is fine. The contact point is the problem. She paused. "I need to talk to Walker." "You could have said this in the briefing." "I didn't have the full calculation until just now," she said. He looked at her. How does that work? You're walking down a corridor and the calculation finishes." "Sometimes," she said. "Is that strange?" "A little bit, yeah." "The data was already in the room," she said. "I just needed a few minutes to finish working through what it meant." Reyes shook his head slowly. Not in frustration, in something closer to admiration that he hadn't quite figured out how to wear yet. "What's the correction?" he asked. "We need a forward observer at the contact point before the extraction team moves. Minimum 20 minutes early. If there's surveillance coverage, I need to know before Walker's people walk into it." Reyes stopped walking. "You want to go in early?" he said. "I want to go in very early," she said. "Alone. That's how I work best at that range and in that role," she said. Not an apology, a fact. "You've spent the last 2 months arguing to stay on a team." "I'm on a team," she said. "That doesn't mean every function I perform has to be performed alongside someone else. A pilot is on a squadron. She still flies the plane herself." Reyes looked at her for a moment. "Walker's going to push back," he said. "Probably," she said. "Want to come hear how that goes?" Walker pushed back. Not hard, he was a good commander, and good commanders pushed back exactly as hard as the situation required, and not harder, but he pushed. "Forward observer solo insertion 20 minutes early into a potentially surveilled contact zone," he said. "Walk me through the risk profile." "Solo insertion minimizes observable signature," she said. 2 people move differently than one. One person at that range in that terrain with my specific movement profile." She paused. "I won't be seen." "You sound very sure of that." "Because I am." She kept her eyes steady on his. "This is exactly what I was trained for. Not peripheral to it, exactly it. Forward observation of surveilled extraction points in compromised environments was the core function of POG-7. I did it 31 times. "Solo," Walker said. "Solo," she confirmed. "And if the surveillance is more extensive than current intel suggests, then I'll assess and report before the extraction team moves," she said. "That's the point. That's what I'm going in early for, so the team doesn't discover the surveillance problem by walking into it." Walker was quiet. Reyes, who was standing near the wall with his arms crossed, said nothing. He had told her Walker would push back. He hadn't told her to stop pushing, which she had noted. "Communication protocol," Walker asked. 15-minute check-ins. If I miss a check-in, you stand down and reassess. If you miss two. If I miss one, you stand down, she said. I won't miss one, but if I do, standing down is the correct call. She paused. I'm not going to tell you the mission can't proceed without my forward observation. That's not accurate. It can proceed without it. It's just significantly higher risk for the extraction team. I'm giving you a way to lower that risk. What you do with it is your call. Walker looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Reyes. Reyes gave the smallest shrug that communicated very clearly, I've already had this conversation with her, and she's right. Walker turned back to Natalie. 22 minutes early, he said. 2 extra minutes as margin. I'll take 25, she said. He almost smiled. 25, he said. Check-ins every 12 minutes. Miss one check-in, we stand down. Not one missed, not two won. Understood, she said. And Brooks? He held her gaze. You come back. The simplicity of it, the directness, the weight of it, the way it landed less like a command and more like something else entirely, stopped her for just a moment. That's always the plan, she said. She went in at 0340. The contact point was in a semi-industrial area, which meant hard surfaces and ambient sound, and the specific challenge of urban-adjacent terrain, where every movement pattern left traces, and every sightline intersected with occupied windows. She moved the way she had always moved in this environment deliberately, reading the space ahead before entering it, building the picture forward of her position in real time. The first check-in at 0352 was clean. She reported no observable surveillance contact point, appears clear continuing assessment. Walker's voice on the return. Copy. Team is staged, standing by. She moved deeper into the assessment zone. At 0401, something changed. Not obviously. Not in a way that would have registered for most people. A parked vehicle that hadn't been in the pre-mission surveillance photographs. The position it occupied created a specific angle on the extraction point, not incidental, deliberate. It was positioned the way a person with training positioned a stationary observation post. She stopped. She assessed. The vehicle had been there long enough to accumulate a specific dust pattern on the windshield that told her it had been stationary for at least 4 hours. 4 hours before the mission parameters were finalized and disseminated, which meant this wasn't a response to their operation. This surveillance had been set before they knew they were coming. The intel penetration was deeper than anyone had assessed. She keyed her radio. Walker, stand down. His response was immediate. Copy. What are you seeing? Pre-positioned observation. The vehicle at the northeast corner of the extraction point has been stationary for minimum 4 hours. The penetration isn't recent, it's deep. They knew about the extraction before we did. Silence on the line. Then, that's not possible. The extraction authorization came through. I know what the timeline says, she said. The dust pattern on that windshield doesn't care about the timeline. Someone in the authorization chain is compromised. She kept her voice level and her eyes moving. The asset isn't safe at the current collection point. We need an alternate. Another silence. Longer this time. Are you burned? Walker asked. No. Certain. I haven't broken a sightline in 16 minutes of movement. Nobody knows I'm here. She paused. But that changes if we try to run the extraction on the current plan. I need you to hold the team and get the asset a message through a clean channel. We need to move the contact point. The only clean channel we have goes through Hargrove's office. Then use it, she said. Right now, before anyone starts moving. She heard him key his secondary radio without signing off from hers. She held her position. In the stillness of that, holding the controlled, trained stillness of someone who understood that movement was the most expensive thing she could do. Right now, she ran the new picture. A pre-positioned observation post meant not just a compromised route, it meant a compromised source. Someone in the authorization chain had known about this extraction and had fed the information upward to the wrong people. The asset had been under the impression they were being extracted through a burned channel. They were actually being walked into a prepared position. If the team had moved on schedule, the extraction would have been catastrophic. Walker came back on her radio at 0409. Hargrove's office is working the alternate channel. Asset is being redirected. Team is holding. He paused. You said deep penetration. Yes. Meaning someone inside the authorization chain. Yes. That's a significant assessment. The dust doesn't lie, she said. Another pause. When he came back, his voice had a quality she hadn't heard from him before, controlled, but carrying something underneath that was going to need space later when the operation was over and they were somewhere that permitted the full weight of what she'd just told him. How long can you hold your position? He asked. As long as needed, she said. 20 minutes, he said. Hargrove needs 20 minutes to work the alternate. Can you hold and monitor? Yes. Report anything that changes. Will do, she said. And she held. 20 minutes in a compromised environment with a pre-positioned surveillance post 12 meters from her position and an active intelligence breach somewhere above her pay grade in the authorization chain. She held it the way she had learned to hold everything that required holding completely, without resentment, without fear, managing to find the spaces where focus needed to be. At 0418, the vehicle door opened. A man got out, moved to the corner, looked in the direction of the extraction point, checked his watch, and got back in. She logged it and reported it at 0420, which was her check-in window. Confirmed active observer, she told Walker. One-person male checking the extraction point on a timed cycle. Cycle appears to be approximately 15 minutes. Copy, Walker said. Hargrove has the alternate channel open. Asset is moving. New contact point is 700 meters north. Team is repositioning now. She heard the shift in his voice on that, the operational focus tightening around the new parameters, and she began her own repositioning, moving north along a path that kept her out of the surveillance post's field and out of any angle that would register against the now active primary observer. She arrived at the new contact point at 0431. Assessed for 4 minutes. Reported. New contact point is clean. No observable surveillance. Recommend proceeding. Walker. Team is 60 seconds out. Asset is 90 seconds out. She held the perimeter while the extraction unfolded, and she was aware of the specific quality of this particular form of work. Not the dramatic center of things, not the visible action, but the unseen frame that made the visible action possible. The asset came out clean. The team moved clean. No shots fired. No exposure. No one hurt. At 0448, Walker's voice on the radio had the particular tone of a completed operation, still controlled, still professional, but with the specific quality of breath that came when a thing that could have gone wrong had gone right. Clear, he said. Brooks status. Secure, she said. Moving to extraction point. Copy. A pause. Good work. She didn't respond to that. Not because she didn't appreciate it. She did in a way that was different from how she had appreciated professional praise before, because this was coming from someone she had chosen, and not someone she was assigned to, but because the moment of an operation's completion was always for her, a moment of quiet, and she let herself have it. 700 meters north, her team was loading a compromised asset into a vehicle that would carry him to safety. She had never fired her weapon. She had never broken cover. She had stopped a catastrophic intelligence failure with a dust pattern and a 12-minute hold. The walk back to the team's position took 14 minutes. When she reached the vehicle, Reyes was the first person she saw. He was leaning against the door with his arms crossed, and his expression doing the thing it sometimes did now, that specific configuration, that wasn't quite the old casual ease and wasn't quite the newer calibrated respect, but was becoming its own thing. Something that had her name on it specifically. Dust pattern, he said. Yes. On a windshield. Yes. You stopped the whole operation because of how dirty a windshield was. I stopped the whole operation because the dust pattern told me the vehicle had been there for 4 hours before anyone in our chain knew there was going to be an operation, she said. Reyes was quiet for a moment. And that tells you there's a breach, he said. That tells me someone knew before they should have known. Yes. He nodded slowly. That's going to be a whole thing, he said. Yes, she said. It is. An internal investigation thing. Almost certainly. That's going to reach high. Yes, she said. Reyes looked at her for a long moment, and in his face was the specific expression of a man who had just fully understood that the woman standing in front of him had not just saved one asset tonight. She had identified a fracture in their command structure that ran upward to places none of them could fully see yet, and she had done it from a dust pattern in a windshield at 4 a.m. Walker's going to need to report this, Reyes said. He already knows, she said. He's already on the radio with Hargrove. And you knew he would be. He's a good commander, she said simply. He does the right thing when he has the information. I gave him the information. Reyes shook his head once, not in exasperation, in the specific, quiet recognition of someone who had spent 7 months looking past something extraordinary and was now finally fully reckoning with what that had cost everyone, most of all the person who had deserved to be seen from the beginning. You're something else, he said. She looked at him. No, she said. I'm just exactly what I am. She got in the vehicle. And in the dark of the early morning, as the team moved toward debrief and the weight of what Natalie had found in a dust pattern began its own kind of reckoning through the chain of command. She was quiet in a way that was entirely her own, not closed off, not absent, but present in the particular way of someone who has done the work they were built for and is sitting inside the clean simplicity of that. Outside, the dark was beginning to shift at its edges. Morning was coming. The mission was over. Everyone was going home. The internal investigation opened on a Tuesday. Natalie knew it would move fast, because internal investigations always moved fast when the breach was high enough to embarrass people with stars on their shoulders. What she hadn't expected was how fast 48 hours from her field report to a full counterintelligence team on base, with a mandate that reached from the compromised extraction route all the way up to the authorization chain that had approved the original mission parameters. She had expected the investigation. She had not expected to be in the center of it. The lead investigator was a lieutenant colonel named Sandra Voss, and Voss operated the way Natalie imagined a very precise instrument operated, without friction, without wasted movement, without any of the procedural theater that some investigators used to establish dominance in interview rooms. She just asked questions and listened to the answers with the complete, unnerving attention of someone who already knew what she was listening for. Their first session lasted 3 hours. Your initial assessment, Voss said on the 3rd page of her notes, was that the vehicle had been in position for a minimum of 4 hours before the operation was authorized. Correct. Your basis was the dust accumulation pattern on the vehicle's windshield. Among other indicators, yes, the dust pattern was the most temporally specific. The other indicators: the tire contact with the road surface, the specific thermal signature of the engine block, which I couldn't measure directly, but could assess based on ambient temperature, and the visible condensation pattern at the exhaust point. The position itself, it was placed with the kind of deliberateness that comes from someone who has had time to assess the space, not someone who was responding to developing intelligence. Voss wrote something. You assessed all of that in approximately 4 minutes, she said. 12 minutes total at the contact point before I identified the vehicle as a surveillance post, Natalie said. The 4-minute figure refers to the assessment of the alternate contact point. And in those 12 minutes at 0401, you identified enough to stop a full extraction operation. I identified enough to know that proceeding was not safe, Natalie said. Whether to stop or continue was Captain Walker's call. But you recommended stopping. I reported what I observed. The recommendation was implicit in the report. Voss looked up from her notes. You're being very precise about where your authority ended and Walker's began, she said. I'm being accurate, Natalie said. Some people would say the same thing. Some people would use precision as a deflection. I'm using it because it's true. She held Voss's gaze steadily. I'm not protecting myself by clarifying the chain of authority. I'm protecting Walker by clarifying that he made the right call with the information I gave him. Those are different things. Voss studied her for a moment. You're protecting your commander, she said. I'm being accurate about my commander, Natalie said. He made a fast, correct decision under pressure using incomplete information from a field observer he'd only been working with for 10 weeks. That deserves to be stated clearly. Another pause. The breach itself, Voss said. The pre-positioned surveillance. You assessed it was inside the authorization chain. The dust pattern told me the vehicle arrived before the operation was finalized. The operation was finalized at 2200. The dust accumulation was consistent with arrival at approximately 2300 hours the previous evening, which is 11 hours before finalization. The only people with knowledge of the operation 11 hours before it was finalized were inside the authorization chain. The room was very quiet. You understand what you're saying, Voss said. I understand exactly what I'm saying, Natalie said. That's why I said it. Checked. Walker found her after the session. She was in the equipment room, always the equipment room, the place she returned to when she needed something functional to do while her mind worked through something. It hadn't finished yet. Running a calibration check she had already run 2 days ago because the repetition was useful and the usefulness was real. He closed the door behind him. How did it go with Voss? He asked. She's good, Natalie said. She already had most of it before she walked in. She was checking my account against what she'd built from other sources. Did your account match? Mine was more specific. She set down the calibration tool. She knows there's a breach in the authorization chain. She's working out how high. Walker's jaw tightened slightly. How high do you think it goes? He asked. I don't have enough information to answer that accurately, she said. But I told Voss everything I observed, and she didn't look surprised by any of it, which tells me she's already found indicators from other directions. She looked at him. Someone in that chain knew about the extraction 11 hours before it was authorized. That's not a junior-level access problem. No, he said. It's not. The weight of that settled in the room between them. The asset is safe, she asked. Safe and relocated, Walker said. Hargrove's office handled the full transfer. He's out of the theater. Good. She picked up the calibration tool again, then set it back down. Walker. When this investigation reaches wherever it's going, when Voss gets to the end of the chain and identifies who knew, there are going to be people who don't want that identification to happen. He looked at her. You think there's a risk management problem, he said. I think people who are positioned high enough to have authorized level access to operation parameters 11 hours before authorization are also positioned high enough to apply pressure to an investigation. She paused. I'm not saying Voss can't handle that. I think she can. I'm saying the pressure is going to come, and when it does, the primary evidence trail runs through my field report. Which makes you a point of pressure, Walker said. Which makes me a point of pressure, she confirmed. He was quiet for a long moment. Are you telling me you're at risk? He asked. I'm telling you that investigations into high-level breaches sometimes develop complications. She chose the word carefully. I want you to know the shape of the situation so you're not caught off guard if something unexpected happens. What kind of unexpected? Reassignment requests, sudden reevaluation of my operational record, questions about the validity of my field assessment methodology. She said it without drama because the drama wasn't useful. Standard ways to undermine a witness without appearing to undermine a witness. Walker's face had gone very still. It was a different kind of still from the controlled professional stillness she had come to know in him. This was the stillness of someone who had just had his blood pressure change and was not going to let the change show past a certain point. If anyone touches your record, he said, and his voice was precise in a way that was different from precision for accuracy, they're going to have to go through my report first. My report says your field assessment saved the entire extraction team from walking into a prepared ambush. That report is already filed with Hargrove's office and copied to the regional command record. He paused. It's already out there. You can't quietly revise an assessment that 6 people plus a colonel have already read. She looked at him. You filed that without telling me, she said. Day after the operation, he said. While you were in the equipment room running a calibration check you'd already run. Something in her chest did the specific thing it had been doing more frequently in the past several weeks, a quiet, deep shift that she didn't quite have a name for yet, but that had Walker's team's shape around it whenever it happened. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, he said. It's accurate reporting. I report what happened. Still, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Are you all right? He asked. Not in the procedural way, in the real way. The way Reyes had started asking things, and Torres, and the way the team had generally started operating with her, with the specific directness of people who had decided she deserved directness. I'm processing, she said honestly. The investigation, the breach, the fact that someone inside the chain I've been operating under was feeding information to the wrong people while we were running missions. She paused. The fact that I identified it from a windshield at 4 a.m, and now there's a lieutenant colonel 3 offices down, working a case that could reach high enough to reach very high. That bothers you, he said. Knowing there was a breach at that level, she looked at him. Yes, it bothers me. I've spent my career trusting the structure around me to be the thing it says it is. Finding out it isn't even partially is not comfortable. Walker nodded slowly. No, he said. It's not. They were quiet for a moment. It changes what you trust, she said. Or it clarifies it, he said. What you actually trust versus what you assumed you could trust. She thought about that. Yes, she said. That's more accurate. He pushed off from the wall where he had been leaning. Whatever comes from Voss's investigation, he said, you report to me and I report up. The team structure holds. That doesn't change. Even if the pressure gets specific, she said. Especially then, he said. He left the room, and Natalie picked up the calibration tool and finished the check she had already run twice, because the repetition was useful, and the steadiness of that usefulness was right now exactly what she needed. The pressure got specific on Friday. It came in the form of a memorandum routed through the regional personnel office, which was a way of making it appear administrative rather than targeted. The memorandum requested a formal review of Sergeant Natalie Brooks's tactical assessment record, citing procedural concerns regarding the methodology of field intelligence reporting in the Southern Sector extraction operation. Walker read it at 700. By 7:15, he was on the phone with Hargrove. By 7:30, he was in Natalie's doorway. She had already seen it. Voss had forwarded her a copy with a note that said 3 words. Expected. We're ready. You knew this was coming, Walker said. I told you it was coming, she said. I mean specifically. You knew the form it would take. The personnel review route is the cleanest way to apply pressure without appearing to apply pressure, she said. It creates a procedural basis for questioning the validity of my report without directly challenging the report. If my assessment methodology can be questioned, the timeline I established from the dust pattern becomes uncertain, and if the timeline becomes uncertain, the argument that the breach was pre-authorization becomes harder to sustain. Walker stared at her. You worked all that out before it happened, he said. I worked out the logic before it happened, yes. The specific form was a reasonable guess. She paused. Voss says she's ready. I believe her. But I want to understand what the review process looks like so I'm not surprised by anything. I'm going to fight the review, Walker said. I know you are. I'd prefer you fight it in a specific way. Tell me. Don't fight the process, she said. Accept the review. Welcome it formally in your response to the memorandum. State that you support a full and thorough examination of the methodology and that you're confident the review will confirm the accuracy of the original assessment. She paused. People who apply this kind of pressure are counting on the target resisting the process because resistance looks like guilt. Welcoming the review removes that dynamic, and it puts the pressure back on the people who called for it to actually conduct it fairly. Walker was quiet. "You've thought about this before," he said. "I've seen this before," she said. "Not to me specifically, but I've seen how these things move." In 6 years of classified work. In 6 years of classified work, she confirmed. He was quiet for a moment more. Then, "All right, I'll draft the response your way. But I'm also putting in a call to—" "Don't tell me who you're calling," she said. He stopped. "If you make calls above our pay grade," she said, "and something moves as a result, I don't want to have known about it in advance. I want to be able to say honestly that I reported what I observed in the field and let the system work." She paused. "Make whatever calls you need to make. Just don't loop me in." Walker looked at her for a long moment. "You're protecting me," he said. "I'm protecting the integrity of my account," she said. "You happen to be adjacent to it." But she said it with enough of the specific warmth that had been growing in the team's orbit for weeks that he heard both things, the professional accuracy and the thing underneath it that wasn't purely professional. He nodded and made the calls she hadn't asked to know about. The review board convened the following Thursday. 3 officers, a full-day session. Natalie's field report from the Southern Sector operation, her methodology documentation, her service record, including the previously restricted portions, which Voss had formally requested access to and received, and the forensic analysis that counterintelligence had run on the extraction site in the 3 days since the operation. The forensic analysis was the thing, because the counterintelligence team had processed the site and found what Natalie's assessment had predicted, not just a surveillance post, but physical evidence of a pre-positioned team with equipment that had been set up over a period of hours, consistent with placement beginning at approximately 2300 the previous evening. Which was exactly what the dust pattern had told her. When the forensic lead confirmed the timing in the review session, one of the 3 board officers, a colonel named Stratton, who had been asking the sharpest questions all morning, put down his pen and was quiet for approximately 10 seconds. Then he said, "The physical evidence timeline matches the field assessment." "Yes, sir," the forensic lead said, "to within approximately 30 minutes. "Yes, sir." Stratton looked at Natalie. She looked back at him. "From a windshield," he said. "From multiple indicators," she said. "The windshield was the most precise." Stratton was quiet for another moment. The other 2 board officers exchanged a glance that said something they weren't going to say out loud in the session, but that Natalie read clearly. The review was intended to undermine the assessment, and it's done the opposite. "I think we have what we need," Stratton said. The session ended at 1400. Natalie walked out of the review room and found Reyes in the corridor. He had no formal role in the review and no reason to be in that corridor at that time except that he was Reyes, and Reyes had apparently decided that being in the corridor when she came out was the right thing to do. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Fine," she said. "Define fine." "The forensic evidence confirmed the field assessment. The board has what they need." Reyes let out a breath. "Okay," he said. "Okay. Good." He paused. "Voss called Walker about an hour ago." She looked at him. "And," she said. "She's got a name," he said. The 3 words landed with a specific weight. Not dramatic, not loud. Just heavy in the way that the identification of a specific person as the source of a breach was always heavy because it meant the damage was no longer abstract. It had a face. "Who?" she asked. "Walker will tell you. I don't have the clearance to know it." He paused. "But from Walker's face when he came out of the call, it's someone he knows." That landed differently. She took a breath. "Where is he?" "Command office," Reyes said. "He said to send you when you were out of the review." Walker was standing at the window when she came in, which was unusual. Walker was a man who sat when he worked and stood when he was in motion, and the standing still at a window was a configuration she had seen from him exactly once before in the corridor after Carson's visit when he was holding something that hadn't finished processing yet. She closed the door behind her. He turned. His face was the face of a man who had been given information he didn't want to have and was in the specific stage of coming to terms with it that required him to be still and quiet before he could be anything else. "Voss has a name," she said. "Major Gerald Hyatt," Walker said. She didn't know the name. She searched her memory carefully, the way she searched everything systematically without rushing, and came up with nothing. "Authorization chain," she said. "Operations coordination. He's been in the role for 14 months. Walker paused. "I've had 3 briefings with him in the last quarter. He had full visibility on every mission parameter that went through regional operations coordination." She said nothing. "He was cleared," Walker said. "Highest level. Background check was current." He stopped. "He was in the room, Natalie. Multiple times. He sat in rooms where I briefed operations, and he was writing things down, and I thought..." He stopped again. "You thought he was doing his job," she said. "He was doing his job," Walker said. "He was also doing something else." She let the silence have its moment. Then she said, "The investigation will determine the full scope. How many operations, what was passed, and when, who received it on the other end." She kept her voice level, not because the situation didn't warrant feeling, but because Walker needed steadiness right now, more than he needed company in the feeling. "That's Voss's work, and she's good at it. What matters for us right now is that the team's operational integrity going forward is intact. Hyatt is identified. He's out of the authorization chain. The missions he had visibility on, Voss will audit them," she said. "Every one. If there are additional compromises, they'll be identified and contained. And the people who were running operations under compromised parameters." Walker. Her voice was firm but not harsh. "You didn't know. Nobody on your team knew. The breach was concealed by someone who was explicitly trusted to have that access. That's not a failure of your command. It's a failure of a safeguard that existed above your command level." She paused. "You can feel the weight of it. You should feel the weight of it. But don't carry it as guilt you don't own." He looked at her. "How are you so clear about that?" he asked. "Because I've seen people carry guilt for things that weren't theirs," she said. "It costs them for years, and it doesn't fix anything." He was quiet. "The extraction team," he said. "If you hadn't caught it..." "I caught it," she said. "If you hadn't..." "Walker." She said his name with enough weight to stop the sentence. "I caught it. That's the real history. The other version isn't history, it's a scenario. Don't live in the scenario. Live in what actually happened." He looked at her for a long moment, and in his face she saw the specific movement of a person taking something in and making room for it, not dismissing the weight, but also not being flattened by it. Finding the place to put it that let you stand up straight and keep doing what needed to be done. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. He moved away from his window and sat down, which meant he was back, not fully, not without the Hyatt information still sitting in him like something sharp, but back in the sense that mattered operationally, and in the sense that mattered between them. "Voss wants a follow-up session tomorrow," he said. "She'll want your read on the full scope." "I'll be there," she said. She also said... He paused. "She said she wants to formally request your participation in the counterintelligence review of operations Hyatt had visibility on. Not as a witness, as an analyst." Natalie was quiet for a moment. "That's not my role," she said. "It could be. She has the authority to request a temporary attachment." He paused. "She specifically requested you. By name." "What did you tell her?" "I told her it was your decision," he said. She thought about it. "Not long. Tell her yes," she said. "On one condition." "Which is?" I come back to the team when it's done, she said. Not reassigned, not reevaluated. I complete the review, I give Voss everything she needs, and then I come back here. Walker almost smiled. I think we can arrange that, he said. Make it explicit in the attachment order, she said. I want it in writing. You want everything in writing, he said. Written things are harder to revise, she said. This time he did smile, small, controlled, but real. I'll make it explicit, he said. She was walking back to the equipment room when Reyes fell into step beside her. He had a cup of coffee in each hand, which she registered with the specific attention she gave to small things that carried larger meanings, because Reyes was a man who made coffee for himself and occasionally for Webb, and had in the 7 months before the mountain made coffee for Natalie, exactly never. He held one cup out to her. She took it. They walked in silence for a few seconds. It's bad, he said. It wasn't a question. It's contained, she said. Which is different from not bad, but it's the better version of bad. Hyatt, he said. How do you know that name? I know Walker's face, he said. And I know which officers in the regional chain Walker has actually briefed in person. He paused. Process of elimination. You should have been an analyst, she said. I'm a people reader, he said. Different thing. She nodded. Yes. They walked another few steps. Are you okay? He asked. Not the way Walker asked. Walker's version had the weight of a commanding officer who had come to genuinely care about the person under his command. Reyes's version was something else. More sideways. More personal. The question of someone who had started in the wrong place with her and had been moving steadily, determinedly toward the right one. I'm all right, she said. And then because it was Reyes, and because the honesty between them had been building for weeks. It's strange, finding a fracture in something you trusted. Even when you identified the fracture, even when you called it correctly, there's still something disorienting about it being real. Because you wanted to be wrong, he said. She looked at him. Yes, she said. I wanted to be wrong. But you weren't. No, she said. I wasn't. He was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, he said, I'm glad you weren't. If you'd been wrong about the windshield, we'd be having a very different conversation, she said. We'd be having several fewer conversations, he said. He meant it as dark humor, the specific black-edged kind that combat operators used to make the unbearable manageable, and she received it that way, which was also the only appropriate way. Yes, she said. So, he looked at his coffee. For the record, for what I said on the mountain day one about the desk-trained soldier thing. I know I already said it, but I want to say it again, now that I know the full scope of what you, Reyes, walked away from to be here. Reyes. He stopped. She looked at him. I know, she said simply. He nodded, and they walked the rest of the corridor in silence that had over months and a mountain and a windshield and a fracture in the chain become something neither of them would have predicted, and both of them now would not have traded. The coffee was good, not great. It was military-base coffee, which was its own category of experience, but warm and shared, and hers. That was enough. That was in fact more than enough. Outside the base was doing what it always did, moving, operating, preparing for whatever came next, and inside the rhythm of that ordinary forward motion, Natalie Brooks carried her cup down the corridor toward the work that was waiting for her, and the team that was waiting for her, and the morning that belonged unambiguously and completely to all of them together. The counterintelligence review took 11 days. Natalie had estimated 10. She had been off by 1, which was close enough that Voss mentioned it in their final session, with something that was almost a dry joke, because Voss was not primarily a joking person, but she had been working with Natalie long enough to have absorbed a small portion of Natalie's specific mode of precise humor, which operated through understatement and accuracy rather than performance. You said 10 days, Voss said, closing the final folder. The Meridian cell documentation took longer than I projected, Natalie said. I underestimated the volume. By 1 day. Still an error. Voss looked at her across the table. You're harder on yourself than anyone I've reviewed in 14 years of this work." "I try to be accurate," Natalie said, "about everything, including my own mistakes." "Is that the same thing?" Natalie thought about it honestly. "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes it tips into something less useful. I'm aware of that." Voss nodded once, which from Voss was the equivalent of a longer affirmation from anyone else. The review had established what Natalie's field assessment had implied. Major Gerald Hyatt had been feeding operational parameters to an external network for 8 months. 14 missions had been compromised in varying degrees. 3 of those missions had produced outcomes that now required reanalysis in light of what the review had uncovered, not failures, but near misses that had been attributed to field variables, and now had a different explanation. The extraction operation had been the 14th. If Natalie hadn't identified the surveillance post, it would likely have been the last one before the breach became visible through catastrophic means, rather than through a dust pattern at 4 in the morning. That fact had been stated explicitly in Voss's formal report. Natalie had read the relevant section twice sitting alone in the review room after the final session, and had then set the report down and been very still for approximately 3 minutes, which was the amount of time she allowed herself before she picked up her phone and called Walker. "It's done," she said when he answered. "When are you coming back?" Not, "How are you? What happened? Are you all right?" Just, "When are you coming back?" Because he knew she was all right, and he knew she would tell him what needed telling, and what he actually wanted to know was when the attachment ended and the real answer resumed. "Tomorrow morning," she said. "I want one night to debrief my own head before I walk back into the team." "Take 2 nights," he said. "1 is enough," she said. "Natalie." His voice had the specific quality he had developed over the months of working with her, not the commanding officer quality, not the formal quality, but the one that existed in the register between professional and personal, that they had been carefully, honestly building since the mountain. "Take 2 nights. That's not me questioning your resilience. That's me saying 11 days of counterintelligence review of a high-level breach is a significant thing to carry, and you're allowed to put it down slowly." She was quiet for a moment. "2 nights," she said. "2 nights," he confirmed. She took them. She didn't sleep well on the first one, which she had expected. Her mind kept running the review not anxiously, but thoroughly, the way it ran, everything checking for what she might have missed, what she might have assessed incorrectly, what the 11 days might have produced differently if she had approached something at a different angle. On the second night, she slept without interruption for 7 hours, which was the most she had slept consecutively in 2 weeks, and when she woke up, the specific quality of the morning told her she was ready. She was back on base by 06:30. The team was in the briefing room when she arrived. All of them. Walker at the head of the table, Reyes in the backward chair that was apparently his permanent configuration, Webb near the wall, Torres and Park side by side on the bench. The same room, the same positions, the same flickering bulb at one end that had still not been replaced. Nobody made a production of her return. Reyes said, "Coffee's fresh, made it 20 minutes ago." Torres said, "Welcome back." Webb gave her the nod. Park, who was the quietest member of the team and expressed himself almost entirely through action, had left a fully organized mission data packet at her usual seat, the material she would need to catch up on what the team had been reviewing. In her absence, assembled with the specific neatness of someone who had taken care with it. She sat down, picked up the coffee, looked at the mission data, and felt in the specific warm solidity of that ordinary moment, something that she had been moving toward for longer than she had names for the simple, grounded completeness of being exactly where she belonged. Walker said, "When you're ready." She opened the first page of the packet. "I'm ready," she said. The mission Walker briefed that morning was different from anything the team had run before. Not in scale, the operational parameters were broadly consistent with what they had been doing. What was different was the intelligence foundation. For the first time, Natalie had been formally integrated into the pre-mission intelligence architecture at the planning level, rather than brought in as tactical support after the framework was already built. Walker had restructured the planning process while she was on attachment with Voss. She noticed it immediately. The way the data was organized, the way the terrain assessments were framed, the specific questions that had been built into the preparatory analysis, it all reflected a planning methodology that had made room for her kind of reading from the very first step. She looked at Walker. He was looking at his own copy of the mission packet. "You rebuilt the planning process," she said. "I adjusted the methodology," he said, "based on 11 days of running it without your input and noticing where the gaps were." "You noticed the gaps." "Reyes noticed the gaps," Walker said. "He was very specific about it." Reyes, without looking up from his packet. "Multiple times." "How many times?" she asked. "I lost count after 7, Webb said. Reyes looked up. "I said what needed saying." Natalie looked at the packet in her hands. She was quiet for a moment. "Then, the northern approach on the primary route. There's a problem." Every head in the room came up. She had been back for 4 minutes. "The surveillance pattern in this sector." She turned to the second page, pointing. "These observation reports are 6 days old. In 6 days, with the Hyatt breach now public knowledge inside their network, any counter-surveillance operation with competent leadership will have repositioned their field assets. This data is accurate for 6 days ago. It's potentially wrong for today." Walker looked at the page she was indicating. "How wrong?" he asked. "Unknown without current observation," she said. "Which is the problem. We're planning on outdated positioning data in a post-breach environment where the other side knows their communications were compromised." She paused. "They'll have adapted. The question is how." The room was quiet. Torres said, "So we don't go in blind on the northern approach. We don't go in on the northern approach at all until we have current data," she said. "The approach itself may still be viable, but I need 12 hours of current observation before I can tell you that with the confidence the mission requires." Walker looked at her. 12 hours, he said. "Minimum," she said. "If what I find changes the assessment significantly, I'll need to extend." "Solo insertion again," he said. "It's the methodology that works at that range in that kind of terrain," she said. "It's not a preference, it's a technical requirement." Walker looked around the table. "Reyes, she's right about the data." "Webb, the 6-day gap in a post-breach environment is a real problem." Torres and Park nodded. Walker turned back to Natalie. 24 hours, he said. "Not 12. If we're going to do this correctly, we do it with full margin. 24 hours changes the mission window," she said. "I know. I'll adjust the timeline. Hargrove will need to approve the delay." "I'll call Hargrove," he said. She looked at him. "All right," she said. 24 hours. She went in the following morning at 300. The 24-hour observation window began in darkness, which was how she preferred it, not because darkness made the observation easier, but because it made her invisible while she built the initial picture, and the initial picture was the one that set everything else. The first 4 hours confirmed what she had expected. The positioning had changed. Not dramatically, whoever was running the counter-surveillance operation on the other side was competent, but not exceptional, and competent, but not exceptional people adapted in predictable ways when they knew their communications had been compromised. They pulled back to their strongest positions. They doubled their observation frequency, and they created redundancy in their coverage that looked more impressive than it was because it repeated rather than extended. She documented it. At 700, she sent her first report to Walker. Positioning has changed. Primary approach now has 3 observation posts instead of 1. However, the posts are clustered covering the same ground from multiple angles rather than extending their coverage zone. The northern approach remains viable if the entry point shifts approximately 200 meters west. Walker's response came in 4 minutes. "Copy. How's the gap? She knew he wasn't asking about the surveillance gap. He was asking how she was in the specific shorthand they had been developing since the mountain, the one that let them conduct personal check-ins inside operational language so that neither of them had to make it more than it needed to be in the middle of a working situation. She appreciated the shorthand. Gap is manageable, she sent back. I'll have the full picture by 1400. She did not have the full picture by 1400. Because at 1347, something changed. She had been holding her position in a building that afforded her a sightline across the primary surveillance zone, and she had been cataloging the pattern of the 3 observation posts, with the patient systematic attention of someone who had been doing this for hours and had settled into the rhythm of it when she saw a 4th post. Not a repositioned post, a new one, placed at an angle that suggested it had been added after the other 3, which meant it was a response to something not part of the original adaptation. She tracked back through the timing. The 4th post had been set up at approximately 1200, which was approximately 4 hours after she had entered the observation zone. She held completely still. There were 2 explanations. The first was coincidence, a planned reinforcement that happened to align with her insertion timing. The second was that someone had detected something that made them add coverage in this sector, and the something was related to her. She didn't know which explanation was correct, and not knowing was the most dangerous condition. She keyed her radio on the secondary frequency, the one she and Walker had agreed on for situations requiring immediate command attention without open channel communication. Walker, I have a complication. His response was immediate. Talk to me. New 4th post at 1200. Placement is defensive, not standard. I need to determine whether it's a planned addition or a response to detection. A short silence. What does your read say? He asked. My read says I haven't broken cover in 14 hours, she said. But my read also says I wasn't expecting a 4th post, which means my initial assessment of their adaptation was incomplete, which means I need to weight my own confidence appropriately. You think you might be blown? I think there's a 15% probability that something in my insertion or movement triggered a heightened response, she said. 15% isn't certainty, but it's enough to require a decision. What are your options? Hold and observe for another 2 hours. If the 4th post activates toward my position, I have confirmation of detection, and I need to extract immediately. If it maintains its current orientation without directional change toward me, the probability drops to approximately 5%, and I can complete the observation. 2 hours, Walker said. 2 hours, she said. Then I'll know. And if you need to extract immediately, I have a clean route. I've had it mapped since insertion. She paused. Walker, I'm okay. I just want you to have the full picture. A short silence. Copy, he said. Check in at 1500. If you miss it, you'll hear from me at 1500, she said. She held. The 2 hours were the most alert hours she had spent in the field in recent memory, and she had spent many alert hours in the field. Every shift in pattern, every movement from the 4 posts, every change in the ambient information that the observation zone was generating, she tracked it, cataloged it, weighed it against the question that was running continuously underneath everything else. Do they know I'm here? At 1445, the 4th post rotated. Not toward her. Away. The coverage it created extended the surveillance zone in the opposite direction from her position. She let out a slow breath. At 1500, she keyed the radio. Walker, the 4th post is a planned addition. Coverage is extending west, not toward my position. I'm not blown. His response. Good. Finish the picture. She finished the picture. By 1800, she had a complete current assessment of the surveillance pattern, the viable insertion routes, the optimal contact points, and a specific recommendation for an approach modification that would reduce the team's exposure at the most critical stage of the mission by approximately 60%. She sent the full report at 1823. Walker's response came back in 7 minutes. It said, "This is the best pre-mission assessment I've received in 15 years. Coming home now, she packed her equipment, and in the quiet of packing the systematic familiar movements of breaking down her position and preparing to move, she held what Walker had written for exactly the length of time she allowed herself to hold things that mattered before she put them in the place where they could stay without demanding too much space. 15 years. She had been doing this work for 6 years in complete anonymity and 8 months on a team that had required her to prove what she was. And a man she trusted had just told her that what she had given him today was the best version of this thing he had seen in 15 years. She finished packing, and she went home. The mission ran 4 days later. Modified northern approach 200 meters west of the original entry point. The team moved with the current intelligence built into every step, not reacting to the picture as they encountered it, but moving inside a picture that had already been built, which was a different experience, and every member of the team felt the difference. Reyes felt it most explicitly. It's like he said to Webb during the staged hold at the secondary checkpoint. It's like having the answer key. It's not the answer key, Webb said. It's better preparation. That's what an answer key is, Reyes said. Webb considered that. Fair, he said. The asset extraction went clean. No surveillance contact. No shots fired. No complications. The team was back on base by 0200. In the debrief, Walker walked through each stage of the mission with the specific precision of someone who had been doing this for 15 years and was still genuinely learning how to do it better. He asked the right questions. He documented the right lessons. And when he reached the pre-mission intelligence stage, he said, "The current observation assessment was the difference between this mission and a significantly more complicated one. That needs to be in the record." He looked at Natalie when he said it. She looked back at him without deflecting, because deflecting was a form of dishonesty, and she had promised herself that when she found the place she belonged, she would be honest in it. "Yes," she said. "It was." Reyes, who was sitting in his backward chair, said nothing, but he was smiling. 6 weeks after the counterintelligence review closed, Voss's formal report was submitted to the regional command and the relevant oversight authorities. The report named Hyatt. It documented the 8 months of breach. It identified the network that had received the information and outlined the damage assessment across the 14 compromised missions. And in its summary section, in the careful formal language of official military reporting, it included a paragraph that Natalie read 3 times when Walker handed her the relevant pages. The paragraph described the identification of the breach. It described the field observation that had established the timeline discrepancy. It described with specific technical accuracy the methodology by which a single field operator had determined from physical evidence at a surveillance site that a breach had occurred at authorization chain level before the operation parameters had been finalized. And it said in the formal, dry, unembellished language of a 14-year counterintelligence professional who chose her words the way surgeons chose cuts. The identification of this breach and the prevention of the catastrophic extraction failure it would have produced is attributable to the field assessment capability of Sergeant Natalie Brooks, whose observational methodology and threat pattern analysis represent a level of operational precision rarely documented in field reporting. Natalie set the pages down. Walker was watching her. "Voss doesn't write things she doesn't mean," he said. "I know," she said. "How does it feel?" She thought about the honest answer. "Strange," she said. "Good strange, but strange." She paused. "I've done significant work before. I know what my record says, but having it named this specifically by someone like Voss, it's different from knowing it yourself." "Because someone else saw it," he said. "Because the right people saw it," she said. He nodded. "They were always going to see it eventually," he said. "I know," she said. I needed to find the place where being seen felt safe." The room was quiet. Walker said, "Did you—" She looked at him. At the team table where Reyes's backward chair was currently unoccupied, but still turned the wrong way, because that was Reyes. At the doorway where Webb had paused on his way to somewhere else, and then decided to stay. At the flickering bulb that had finally 2 days ago been replaced, Torres had done it without announcement the way Torres did things. At the space around her that had over 8 months and a mountain and a dust pattern and 11 days and 24 hours alone in a compromised sector and a cup of coffee shared in a corridor become the thing she had asked for when she walked into Hargrove's office and said the most honest thing she'd said to anyone in uniform in years. "Yes," she said. "Good," Walker said. And that was it. No ceremony. No formal declaration. Just the simplest, most direct confirmation available between two people who had both learned that directness was a form of care. The nickname came from outside the team. She never found out exactly where it started, somewhere in the overlap between the Mountain Incident Report and Voss's counterintelligence review, and the modified mission assessment in the specific way that information moved through special operations communities, which was less like formal dissemination and more like water finding paths through stone. What she knew was that one Tuesday morning, approximately 3 months after the Mountain Reyes came into the common room with the specific expression he wore when he was carrying something he found simultaneously funny and significant. "You have a call sign," he said. She looked up from her coffee. "I have a designation," she said. "You have a call sign," he said. "The informal kind. The kind that travels." "What is it?" he told her. "The ghost behind the scope." She was quiet for a moment. "That's dramatic," she said. "That's accurate," Reyes said. "It's both," Webb said from the doorway. She looked at both of them. "I don't need a call sign," she said. "You don't need a lot of things you have," Reyes said. "That doesn't make them wrong." She thought about arguing. She had the arguments ready. She didn't want visibility. She didn't need the weight of a reputation that would precede her into rooms. She had spent her career specifically avoiding the kind of profile that came with names that traveled. But she held the arguments and looked at the two men in front of her and understood something that she hadn't understood yet, or hadn't let herself understand. The name wasn't about what she wanted. It wasn't recognition she'd sought. It was what the work had made visible in the end, regardless of how quietly she'd done it. "All right," she said. Reyes looked surprised. "That's it. Just all right. What were you expecting?" "At least 3 objections," he said. "I'm adapting," she said. He grinned, the full version, the one she had seen in pieces over 8 months, and now saw whole. "Good," he said. Hargrove called on a Thursday. The call came through official channels, which meant it was official, but Hargrove's voice had the register of the conversations they had in corridors, rather than conference rooms. "The Directorate is reopening the discussion," Hargrove said. Natalie had been expecting this. The counterintelligence review's findings. Voss's report, the modified mission assessment, they had all moved through channels, and channels led to the Directorate. "Same offer?" she asked. "Expanded," Hargrove said. "They're talking about a program specifically designed around your methodology, not a precision unit. A pattern analysis and counterintelligence field capability. Small, elite, full classification, and..." She paused. "Team-based. They're specifically proposing a team model this time." Natalie was quiet. "They read what I said in the first review," she said. "They read everything," Hargrove said, "including the part where you told Carson that what you were keeping was worth more than what you were giving up." A pause. "They're trying to build the offering around what you said you needed." She processed that. "The team I have now," she said. "Would transfer with you if Walker agrees," Hargrove said. "The Directorate wants the full unit, Walker included. They're not trying to extract you from the team anymore. They're trying to bring the team up." The room was very quiet around her. She had not seen this coming. She noted with the small, precise part of her that catalogued her own errors that she had not seen it coming, which meant she had been wrong about the shape of what was being offered. She had assumed the Directorate's second approach would be a refined version of the first. It wasn't. It was something structurally different, something that had taken her answer to Carson seriously enough to design around it. That was either very good thinking on someone's part, or it was an extremely well-constructed way to get her to say yes. "I need to talk to Walker," she said. I know, Hargrove said. And the team. I know that too. Hargrove. She paused. Is this genuine, the team model? Is it actually how the program would operate? Or is it the structure on paper that collapses into something else once the operational reality sets in? I wouldn't bring it to you if I thought it was theater, Hargrove said. You know me well enough to know that. She did. Give me 48 hours, she said. You have them, Hargrove said. Natalie. A pause. Whatever you decide, you've done something in the last 8 months that most people in this branch never do. You found the thing you needed, and you built it under conditions that weren't designed to make it easy. That doesn't disappear regardless of which direction this goes. She held the phone for a moment after the call ended. Then she went to find Walker. He was in the briefing room, alone, which was unusual. He had the mission data spread across the table in the particular organized pattern of someone who was in the middle of thinking through something complex. And when she came in, he looked up with the immediate attention he gave her, not the professional attention, the full attention. She told him about the call, all of it. The expanded offer, the team model, the transfer provision. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, the room was quiet. What do you want? He asked. Not, what should we do? What does the directorate want? What does Hargrove think? Just what do you want? She appreciated that question more than she had words for. I want to know what you think, she said. Honestly. He was quiet for a moment. Honestly. He looked at the mission data on the table, then back at her. I think the directorate read you correctly. I think a program built around your methodology with a genuine team model could be extraordinary. I think the work you could do at that scale is beyond what I can give you here. He paused. And I think you should know that I will support whatever you decide, including staying exactly where you are, and I mean that without the subtext you might be reading into it. There's no subtext, she said. Good, he said. I want to bring it to the team, she said. Okay. All of them. Together. I want to tell them what's on the table and I want to hear what they think before I decide anything. He nodded. I'll get them in the briefing room at 1800. Walker. She looked at him directly. If the team agrees and you agree, I want to go. Not because what we've built here isn't enough. It's more than enough. It's the thing I came here for. She paused. But if the directorate is genuinely offering the chance to do this work at scale with these people, I think we should. Walker looked at her for a long moment. 1800, he said. The team meeting lasted 40 minutes. She told them everything. The offer, the team model, the transfer provision, the scale of what was being proposed. She told them what Hargrove had said, and what she had asked, and what the answers had been. She told them what Walker had told her, and what she had told Walker. And then she said, I'm not making this decision without all of you. That's not how we work. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Reyes said, Does the new assignment have better coffee? Torres laughed an actual full laugh, which from Torres was significant. Park said, I've been in the same region for 2 years. I'm ready. Webb said, The methodology you'd be bringing to that program, the pattern analysis capability, it's going to change what's possible. You know that. Torres said, We go where the team goes. She looked at Walker. He had been quiet through all of it, listening the way he listened to everything completely without managing what he heard. We go, he said. Together. She looked at all of them. At Reyes in his backward chair. At Webb near the wall. At Torres and Park side by side. At Walker at the head of the table where he had always been from the first briefing she had stood at the back of and listened to for 7 months before they knew her. All right, she said. All right, Reyes said. We go. Optimism. The transfer orders came through on a Monday. The new program had a formal designation that was classified and an informal name that circulated through the channels where informal names lived. Something that referenced precision and pattern and the specific kind of work that happened before anyone pulled a trigger. Natalie didn't particularly care about the name. What she cared about was was the table in the first planning session of the new program, where 6 people sat with the same data and the same mission and the same commitment to doing the work with the full truth of what each of them was, no concealment, no managed distance, no gap between what they carried and what the people beside them knew they were carrying. The first mission briefing of the new program was conducted by Walker. When he reached the intelligence analysis component of the briefing, he turned to Natalie without ceremony. "Brooks," he said. She was already ready. She talked for 22 minutes. In those 22 minutes, she built a picture so precise and so complete that when she finished, the room was quiet, with the specific quality of people who have just understood something about the scale of what they're working with. One of the new program officers, a man who had been in special operations for 12 years and had the particular bearing of someone who had seen most things, looked at Walker. "She does this every time," he said. "Every time," Walker said. The officer looked at Natalie. She looked back at him with the steady, direct attention she brought to everything. "I've heard about the mountain," he said. "Most people have by now," she said. 8 positions, 12 minutes. "Yes. Is it true you mapped them before the ambush started?" "I had 4 of them before the first shot," she said. "The other 4 confirmed during." He was quiet for a moment. "How?" he asked. She had been asked this question in various forms since the mountain. By Walker, by Voss, by Hargrove, by the review board, by every person who had read the incident report and tried to build a picture of the cognitive process behind it. She had given different versions of the answer, each time calibrated to what the person asking actually needed to understand. This time, she gave the complete version. "Pattern," she said. "Everything has a pattern. Terrain behavior, decision-making movement, the way people hide, and the way hidden things leave evidence of themselves whether they intend to or not. I've spent years learning to read the patterns, not just what they show, but what they mean and what they predict." She paused. "On the mountain, I read the pattern. The rest was just math." The officer absorbed this. "And the dust pattern in the southern sector," he said. "Same principle," she said. "Different evidence, same structure." He nodded slowly. "What we're building here," he said. "This program. Is that what it's going to be, pattern analysis and field precision?" "That's what it is," she said. "That's what it's always been. I'm just doing it where more people can see it." He looked at Walker. Walker said nothing, because there was nothing to add. 3 months into the new program, a training document was produced. It was formal and classified and written in the dry, specific language of military training materials, and it covered the methodology of field intelligence observation, counter-surveillance assessment, and pre-operational threat analysis. It was authored by Sergeant Natalie Brooks. Reyes found out about it before she told anyone, because Reyes found out about things, and he came to find her in the equipment room. Always the equipment room, a constant she had carried from base to program to wherever this was now going, and he sat down on the floor with his back against the wall, which was unusual even for Reyes, and he said, "They're turning your methodology into a training document." "I know," she said. "I wrote it." He was quiet for a moment. "You know what this means," he said. "It means other people will be able to use the methodology in the field," she said. "It means you're permanent," he said. "Not you specifically, I mean, yes, you specifically, but I mean the way you think. The pattern reading, the dust patterns, and the bird movements, and the branch against the wind. That's going to be in training programs. That's going to be how people learn to observe." He paused. "You came here because you didn't want to be alone in the work anymore. You're not. You're never going to be." She looked at him. At Dominic Reyes, who had called her a desk soldier in a briefing room 8 months ago, who had waited in a corridor after a debrief because he needed to say something, who had made 2 cups of coffee in a hallway and handed her one without ceremony, who was now sitting on the floor of an equipment room, telling her something she had needed someone to say. "No," she said. "I'm not." He nodded. They were quiet for a moment. "The ghost behind the scope," he said. "That's what they're calling the training module." She hadn't known that. Something in her went very still, not the trained stillness of a field position, but the different kind, the kind that happened when something landed in the exact place where there was room for it. "That's a terrible name for a training module," she said. "It's a perfect name," Reyes said. She looked at the wall. "Yes," she said. "It is." Yet, the last thing Natalie Brooks ever said about the mountain in any official or unofficial context came in response to a question from Torres on an ordinary evening in a room that smelled like the same base coffee it always smelled like. While outside, the kind of darkness settled that comes before the kind of morning that belongs to the people who were willing to wait for it. Torres asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened on the mountain if you hadn't moved when you did?" She thought about the honest answer. "Sometimes," she said. "Less than you'd think." "Why less?" "Because what happened is what I have to work with," she said. "The version that didn't happen isn't mine to carry." Torres was quiet. 8 positions, he said. 12 minutes. "Yes. That was always in you," he said. "Even when nobody knew." She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "It was." "And now people know." "Yes," she said. "Now they do." And in that simple declarative fact, the unadorned truth of what had always been present, finally made visible, finally given the space to be exactly what it was. Sergeant Natalie Brooks, who had spent 6 years working alone in silence and 8 months finding her way back to the world, was precisely, completely, and permanently home.